Hello and welcome. I'm John O'Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios, and these are our top stories. The British Prime Minister travels to President Trump's golf course in Scotland to discuss Gaza and transatlantic trade. It comes as the US President agrees to a major tariff deal with the EU in what's been called the world's largest bilateral trade investment relationship. Meanwhile, Israel continues to pause military activity in Gaza to allow aid deliveries in. And Thailand and Cambodia agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire after peace talks. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has travelled to Scotland today to visit President Trump and his golf course in Ayrshire. It marks day 4 of the US President's trip. The two leaders have been discussing the ongoing conflict in Gaza, as well as ongoing trade deals between the US and the UK. Here's what they had to say in Turnberry. Have a listen.
And you've done a fantastic job with regard to the trade deal. You know, they wanted a trade deal here for years, many years, that brings unity. We didn't need unity. We also discussed, obviously, Gaza. And I think before we get to phase 2, which is, you know, what's going to happen afterwards, we want to get the children fed. We made a contribution a week ago of $60 million, all going into food. We also discussed inside that we are, you know, there's a whole new thing happening with regard to energy from nuclear. And the Prime Minister's looking at that very strongly, and I know you have Rolls-Royce nuclear plants. That sounds pretty good, right? I love that.
Now, to discuss this and all of today's stories, we're joined in the studio by Michael Jabri-Pickett, the Managing Director of This Is Dubai, and by journalist Lubna Hamdan. Both of you, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, Michael, we'll turn to you. The two leaders, lots to discuss, it seems, today. Let's start with how it went overall. What do you think? Good optics or bad?
I think it depends on your perspective. If you were hoping for Hugh Grant from Love Actually, I think you would be disappointed.
Yes.
But if you are a worker in the UK who is hoping that your industry would not be facing harsh tariffs, then I think you can be pleasantly satisfied that your man at the top, the Prime Minister, was not targeted, and he did nothing to irritate arguably the most powerful man in the world. And you want to sort of have those meetings, touch base with the president, and then kind of get out cleanly. You don't want to get Zelensky'd, as it were.
Because we've seen that happen a lot, right? And I think that's probably one of the things that any world leader going into a discussion with Donald Trump now is concerned about, is what is the fallout that's likely to happen from the meeting or after the meeting. Lubna, what exactly does it mean for the rest of the world? Is this going to make a significant change in global politics, a meeting like what we've seen today?
I think I disagree with you, Michael, right? Can I say that first of all? Because I think he was Zelensky'd a little bit, right? He was cut off by Trump, and I think we saw sort of a similar pattern with Zelensky in the Oval Office. I think it was embarrassing to be Keir Starmer today.
But now, in saying that, did he come out of it the other side and say, well, right, because there's still a win at the end of the day. The trade deal is still better than what Europe got, and we will get to that in a while. Is he still just maybe pacifying Trump to be like, I'm here, I'm not going to cause a scene. I want to walk away the other side with the bigger man, somewhat?
Sure, absolutely. But I think that's short-sighted, right? In the long run, is that really going to work or not? Because Trump is unpredictable. He hasn't done anything to warrant him being interrupted in the press conference today. So I don't know, is that the right way to play this game? I don't know, because I didn't see any mutual respect between them. Whereas if it were Putin speaking with him, you know, we would have seen something different.
Yeah, I guess a very different ballgame. Michael, anyone is scared to antagonize President Trump at the moment, is what it seems.
Yeah, I think that's the PR line that you are fed if you're the leader going in, speaking with Donald Trump. I think the goal is not to antagonize him, not to get in his crosshairs. You want to make sure that he feels like you are like-minded. And that's one of the things that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke about today, is that they both seem to, at least publicly, agree on many things. They get along, they respect each other, so they say. And that, unfortunately, it's the way that it is right now with the President of the United States. You have to give him the impression that you're a man or a woman who's on his side.
Lubna, I guess we've seen a little bit of a change in the rhetoric that we've heard from Donald Trump. We know that September 2nd, that 50-day mark is looming ever closer. Now Donald Trump said, I'm actually going to reduce that down even more. So even though this is a personal trip, it's been used as a political chance to discuss that Ukraine-Russian ceasefire deal. And he's used that to his advantage on this trip.
I think it's all theatrics, Jono, honestly, because I don't think Putin is fazed by that statement at all. I think the ball is in Vladimir Putin's court right now, and I think Trump is just buying time. He hasn't achieved a ceasefire in Ukraine. He made a lot of promises and hasn't delivered. So, I mean, for me, I don't see the point of making that statement at all, except for buying time, honestly.
Michael, what do you think? Bringing that to the table today, was that necessary, do you think, while he's on the golf course? Because it is a personal trip, isn't it?
It is a personal trip, but I don't think the location matters. Not if you're talking about global issues, especially a war where people are dying. I don't think the setting matters if you're prepared to talk about something of substance. Now, I did see one critic who said all this means is that Vladimir Putin will ignore Donald Trump earlier. And I think that there is some truth in that. I do think that the Russian president is probably of the opinion, I'll just wait and see what happens, because maybe in 10 days or 12 days, something else will distract him, or something else will make him move the deadline even more. And if Vladimir Putin were to come out and say, I'm prepared to talk, can you just give me a little bit more time? Not that he will, but if he were, I think Donald Trump would probably feel, oh, he's now playing my game. He's agreed to come to the table to negotiate a ceasefire, so we'll give him a couple of extra weeks.
Lots discussed as well about Gaza, and although you said Keir Starmer kind of walked away almost like a beaten puppy at the end of that, there was still one thing that he stuck by his guns on, that was mentioning Gaza to Donald Trump. So do you think that was somewhat of a win?
A little bit. I don't know if you can consider it a win, since everything's been done already in Gaza. You know, there's a famine going on, and you know they've already accomplished their goal in Gaza. So I think it's a little too late. So I just don't think it's gonna, gonna make a difference with people. Honestly, whatever anybody says at this point, unfortunately. So I don't know. I thought it was really underwhelming, the meeting, personally, and I think actually the fact that the setting was on his golf course, you know, he had a lot of security, right?
Yeah.
I think he's just a PR, stuntman at this point, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Michael, 6,000 officers. There's only 16,000 in Scotland. They've had to ship people in from Northern Ireland to help out with this as well. The cost of this, and I'm going to take it back to 2018 on the official presidential visit for a 4-day trip, $20 million US. $4 million of that for his last trip to Turnberry alone. So we can assume that the cost will probably run significantly higher with inflation. We're now, 8 years later. So this is a significantly expensive trip, but for the UK taxpayer, I think.
But I think when you have such a divisive figure, who's also arguably one of the two most powerful men in the world, I think there's going to be the need for security. I also think that when you're going to a foreign country that is a democracy where people can go and protest, I think that's going to add another layer in the need for security. You have to remember that there was an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania on Donald Trump in America. So when you're going overseas, the last thing that the Secret Service want to do is take any chances, and nor do you want to be the leader of a country where there's an assassination attempt on the president. You want to make sure that everything is buckled down as tight as it can be.
At Lubna, there was also the protest that we saw. Now, when I spoke earlier on to John, which we'll catch up with in a second, he said that was kind of zoomed in. There was protest, but it's not that many people. Did you expect there to be a heavy amount of protest when Donald Trump rocked up to Scotland?
I did actually, considering, a lot of people were against the golf course. There were a lot of environmentalist issues around that. But I mean, look, the media love to hate on Donald Trump, right? But that's even better publicity for him. And speaking also about the assassination attempt, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I don't know who poses during an assassination attempt. So that was a bit bizarre as well. So I don't know. I feel like even the fact that he has the security and he's known for, he just loves luxury and being over the top. So I think it's just part of his personality at this point, right?
It certainly seems to be a divisive trip. Earlier, I spoke to John Boothman, who is a political journalist in Scotland with The Times, about how the visit is going down with the locals. Have a listen to this.
Look, there's only 16,000 police officers in Scotland, and 6 of them are being deployed all around about 2 golf courses for Donald Trump. Turnberry, the village of Turnberry has been called the smallest fortified village in the world. There are police officers here to augment that force from Northern Ireland and all parts of England just to help out. You know, the operation is absolutely huge. The comparison I was going to make was with the COP26 climate change conference, which took place in Glasgow in 2026. Local people in Scotland are kind of, well, they're asking the question, who's going to have to foot the bill for this? As I say, it was after all billed as a private visit. It's turned into something much more. We're going to see again J.D. Vance is coming to Scotland next month. So we're going to see something on that front. As I say, people are quite annoyed by the cost of this. And it's caused a fair amount of disruption as well.
Now, this was, I guess, still a win at the end of the day because business is being done. Final thoughts on this, Michael and Lubna, both of you. Yes, we've had a go about what has been the overall rhetoric. We've seen the First Minister of Scotland is heading tonight to have dinner in Aberdeenshire as well. I guess there's still been some business done. So the Trump media machine takes away a win out of this trip, surely, no?
So from the Trump side, yes, I think it is a win because he's got the deal with the EU that he can talk about. And the president of the EU, Ursula, was very complimentary, saying that it was the biggest. She used the superlatives that Donald Trump loves, the biggest, the best, the largest. And that's what really gets him engaged. And so Donald Trump can talk about that. And he can also talk about a successful meeting with First Minister and also with Keir Starmer. So there are victories from his side. From the host's side, I think that, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but for people to be able to sort of slide under the radar and not to come away from a meeting where they are the news, I think that's a little bit of a victory.
Lubna, final thoughts on this. What victory for the Trump machine, so to speak?
For the Trump machine? Sorry, I thought you were asking me about Scotland because I think this is great for business in Scotland.
Yes, it is great for business in Scotland.
The entire trip, right? And it reminds me a little bit, well, not entirely, but a little bit of the comparison between, the Jeff Bezos wedding in Venice, right? People were protesting against that as well. But is it great? It's business. Business is business at the end of the day. I'm not a huge fan of Trump's. However, I think it'll do Scotland good.
Which is what he wanted to do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you both for your thoughts on that. We had touched on the tariffs ever so slightly, so let's move on to that story now. The US has finally agreed a major trade deal with the European Union after weeks of negotiation. President Trump has called it the biggest deal ever made, adding that it will be great for cars and have a big impact on agriculture. The US will impose a 15% tariff on most EU goods entering the United States, a climb down from the original 30% levy. Here's how European Commissioner, President Ursula von der Leyen, broke the news.
We have stabilized on a single 15% tariff rate for the vast majority of EU exports. This rate applies across most sectors, including cars, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. We will work together to ensure fair global competition and to reduce barriers between us. Tariffs will be cut and a quota system will be put in place. We will also increase our energy cooperation.
Lubna, let's talk about this with you first. What exactly is this deal? What's been agreed?
Yeah, so I've got some of the figures here, right? So we've gone from 50% to 30%, and now it's 15% baseline tariffs, with the exception on steel, which is being taxed at 50%. And then we've got the EU committed to buying over $750 billion in energy from the US, which is larger than the Japan deal, I believe.
Yeah, so it's huge for them.
It's huge for them. I don't know, though, if it's entirely good for the EU, if it really was. I mean, with Trump, every deal is the best deal and the biggest deal. For Trump, I definitely think he came out the winner, but for the EU, I just don't see it that way.
We'll deep dive into those in a second and see who's the big winners and big losers. But who do you think, Michael, came out on top here, Trump or the EU?
I think they were both, I don't want to say winners, but they were both equally unsuccessful or successful. I think the EU was able to cut the deal, the best deal that they could, and I think Donald Trump was able to get the precious tariffs that he so desperately wanted. I do wonder about the $750 billion in energy products and the $600 billion in investment. I don't know that those will actually come to fruition. I think that they will be signposts, and I think that there will be victories along the way. But if you're an accountant and you wanted to add up the totals, I don't think you'll get that amount when everything is said and done.
We saw, Lubna, when in that discussion there, von der Leyen saying that this is a big win for Europe. It's 15%. The UK managed to negotiate down 10%. So is it really such a big deal and such a big win for Europe? Or is that just some bravado that's been shared?
Yeah, look, I think they just don't want to poke Trump at this moment in time. So I think that it is a win, just the fact that, you know, they avoided a trade war, right? And just the fact that they came to a deal with him. So I think Europe is the biggest loser anyway. I just don't think, you know, I don't think they could have been a winner with Trump. It's just,
but
they just don't have the upper hand, right? So.
No, they don't. But I mean, to go from 50% to 30% to 15% is a win. Do you think 15% was always in Trump's mind to say, we'll get down to 15?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's a win at all. I think that was his plan to begin with, right?
So you reckon that's where he was. Would he have gone lower? Do you think 10% would have been something that they could have walked away with had they negotiated a bit harder?
I mean, I don't know, perhaps, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that was Trump's plan all along, right? I think anyone who's been following his policy for a while can tell that that's what he wanted. He wanted just to shake up the market, you know, and it's a typical, if anyone's watched the movie The Apprentice as well, I'm just obsessed with the movie because it's so accurate and it's really entertaining. But it's a typical Trump move, and I think it's brilliant, and he's gotten what he wanted. So I do think he's the winner in this, honestly.
Michael, a lot of, and this is individual, there's obviously a sense of solidarity within the European Union, but there's, from some countries, a sense that we could have got a better deal had we gone direct. We saw what the UK could have got, maybe we could have done better.
But I think there are always going to be people who are not getting their issues at the top of the agenda when you have one person who is representing 27 entities, 27 countries. I also think that, you know, the EU, and this is why I would say they weren't necessarily winners, but they weren't necessarily losers. They were in that unique position where they needed to keep Donald Trump engaged because they have real security concerns on their doorstep. And they also didn't want him protracting this potential tariff war into something that could be used, where the security issue would be used against them so that he could get the tariffs. So if the EU is able to give him 15% instead of the 10%, but also keep him engaged for security concerns, I think that's where the EU recognized, while the French Prime Minister said it was a dark day for Europe, I think that in the long run, at least for Donald Trump's presidency for the next 3.5 years, it's something that they accept, I believe, that they had to do.
Let's talk about the big winners and the big losers. Who won? US car makers for sure. They've got a reduced rate down on there. US energy has definitely won, and we've heard it mentioned there as well, how much energy is going to be bought from the US by Europe. Losses though, pharmaceuticals, German car makers, and more importantly, US consumers will have the loss out here as well. 15% on an import of something that's $100 makes that $115. Lubna, I guess the people who are going to suffer here are the people who are the end of the day taxpayers more than anything else.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I feel for I feel for Europe. You know, I just came back from a trip in Italy, and it's incredibly gloomy, and I don't really know what to say about that. I do want to recall a quote from Henry Kissinger, and you know, we can talk about security concerns in Europe, but that is because of the U.S., right? I just feel like Europe is right now under the mercy of the U.S. It's under the mercy of Trump. And Henry Kissinger once said, you know, to be America's friend to be America's enemy is dangerous. To be America's friend is fatal. So unfortunately, it's the European consumer who's suffering at the end of the day.
Yeah, but just to reiterate what Michael said, I think without US on board, China doesn't have that concern, but without the US on board, Europe is in a very precarious situation given the turmoils in the region. And I think they can't really risk right now to get into a trade war with the US. And I'm sure you'd agree, Michael, on this. Without them there to protect, the EU is a little bit flippant. It doesn't have the protection it requires.
Yeah, absolutely. How can I have an argument with you about something where it could deteriorate, break the relationship, but I also need you desperately for something that's very important for my survival? So there has to be an acknowledgement on the part of the 27 EU countries that while we might not have gotten the 10% that the UK got, we got something that makes Donald Trump happy, but also will hopefully allow him to continue to send us weapons when needed.
Which it seems to be the end goal for this. But thank you both very much, Lubna. Thank you, Michael, for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story. Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a ceasefire, bringing to an end days of fighting between the neighbouring countries. The agreement follows a meeting that was mediated by Malaysia. It is just the first step, though, towards peace talks between the two sides. Patrick Falk has this report.
Malaysia's political centre, Putrajaya, was the stage for talks to try and end the crisis between Thailand and Cambodia. Prior to the meeting, any breakthrough seemed as though it might be up in the air. The dispute over their shared border has turned into their deadliest conflict in more than a decade, and neither side appeared to be willing to back down. Then, following the face-to-face, a deal announced by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who'd urged the neighbouring countries to come to the negotiating table last week.
Prime Minister Hun Manet and Acting Prime Minister Phumtham Vichayachai have expressed their positions and willingness to immediate ceasefire and return to normalcy. This is a vital first step towards de-escalation and the restoration of peace and security.
Under the agreement made in Malaysia, Thailand and Cambodia also said they would convene a meeting of military officials on Tuesday. Dialing down tension on the ground will be critical towards keeping the ceasefire deal in place. In recent days, both sides have traded accusations at one another over who fired first and violations of military conduct.
We hope that the solutions that Prime Minister Anwar just announced will set a condition for moving forward for our bilateral discussion to return to normalcy of the relationship and as a foundation for future de-escalation of forces.
We agree to a ceasefire with assurance myself that it will be carried out successfully in good faith by both sides.
Also participating in the talks today, representatives from China and the United States. Earlier, President Donald Trump warned there'd be no tariff deal with either Thailand or Cambodia if they didn't put a stop to the fighting. With an August 1st deadline for cutting trade deals looming, pressure was on. It's still hard to say if there'll be sustained peace. Malaysia says it will observe and verify efforts from both sides and to ensure accountability. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya, Singapore.
To Gaza now, where Israel says 120 truckloads of food have been handed out in the Strip today. It follows Israel's declaration of a tactical pause in the fighting, promising to allow aid into the area. Now, the limited break in fighting comes after aid agencies warned of mass starvation in Gaza, with the World Health Organization revealing malnutrition had reached alarming levels. Michael, it is once again a concern. It is a step in the right direction to see any sort of a pause. Is it purely strategic or is it something that we actually really needed right now that might lead to something more?
If it's strategic, I don't know what the strategy is. But as you said, any pause in the fighting is a good thing. Unfortunately, there have been pauses in the past and Israel has had no problem breaking those. But what's interesting today is that you've had, in addition to Amnesty and the ICJ and the Doctors Without Borders and academics and former Israeli prime ministers and historians, you had two Israeli human rights organizations come out, and they all agree that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. It is concerted efforts to kill the Palestinian people. And while we always will welcome airdropping of food and will always welcome more trucks. The volume of trucks are not where they should be. Of course, as we've spoken about before, Israel's stats say that about 146 trucks a day on average have gotten in, where the US says that you need 600 to feed 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. This is where we stand today. While a 10-hour pause can be celebrated, we need so much more done on the part of the international community, specifically the United States, to pressure Israel to do more.
Lubna, 10 hours, it's a start, but after this 10 hours, any more signs a ceasefire could be agreed upon, or any extension on this 10 hours, do you think?
I mean, I sure hope so. It seems really hopeless at this point because, as I mentioned before, and it gets really tiring talking about this because it's just the same thing over and over again. They've accomplished their goals already. I think this is definitely a strategic move by Netanyahu because he's coming under fire. You know, people are sick of seeing these scenes and horrific images coming out of Gaza. So I definitely think it's a strategic move. I do hope for a ceasefire, of course. You know, they'll take anything at this point, right? Speaking from a humanitarian point of view, but yeah, looks pretty hopeless.
Look, a lot of people are saying that the coalition, that Netanyahu's coalition, may actually be the reason why this could have happened. Michael, to say that we need to get humanitarian aid in there, and of course, there's been a flood in, like you rightly mentioned, 146 trucks versus the 600 that's required, is a dip in the ocean, and we can fly in as much aid as we want, but it really is only going to maybe take a tiny bite out of what's actually required to solve what is now turned into a famine situation on the ground.
Yeah, it really is. We need so much more. And this is where the strategy comes into play, where I would say that Netanyahu his strategy is to stay in power. And for him to stay in power, he has a lot of hawks in his cabinet who are very much consistent in their messaging that they want to make sure that Israel and the IDF stays in Gaza, and then that they don't do anything until the job is done. And for them, we are not quite sure what the job is. You can read between the lines with some of these ministers where they want more and more and more and more. They want to take more of the Gaza Strip, and they are okay with more Palestinians dying. So Netanyahu does need to make sure that his cabinet stays in line, and that's probably where the strategy comes into play.
Let's come back to that in just a second. Earlier, I spoke to the Associate Professor of International Politics, Murat Aslan, about the ICJ case that's looming, about how the tactical shift in tone is from Netanyahu right now at the moment. Have a listen to what he had to say.
You know, we need a rule of law that's based on order, but no, we are subjected to rule of power. In this picture, the one who feels weaker or who are weaker, then that's for sure they will lose it. I think international law is really important to be observed, especially just war conceptualization. The conventions that clearly depicts the war, conflicts, or genocide. In this sense, Israel will experience some hardships because jus ad bellum, jus in bello, these are the two principles of international law regulating especially the conflicts. And well, jus in bello, that means how to proceed a war, is totally violated, especially appropriate usage of force or protection of civilians or excessive use of power. These are the norms should be observed, and unfortunately, Israel did not.
Murat Aslan speaking to me earlier. Now, Lubna, we are seeing the chaotic scenes around the food trucks that we saw today. So this pause in activity, in military activity on the ground, seems to be leading to a lot more chaos among the people who really desperately need this aid.
Yeah. I mean, look, the scenes are horrific, you know. I just don't know what can be said at this moment in time where we're really witnessing, genocide and famine live on TV, and I just, as a Palestinian as well, it's kind of, hard to be biased on this. I really don't know.
We're seeing, and as we can see on the screen right now, thousands of people who are making their way to, for a fraction amount of aid that is available. As a Palestinian seeing something like that and seeing your people suffer, what is your immediate reaction? Aside from horror at seeing scenes like that, what is your immediate reaction to seeing that and knowing that these people are desperately in need of food and aren't able to make their way to the front of the queue to get it? And even if they could, there's not enough there for everyone.
I mean, gosh, I just, again, I really have no words because it can be allowed in, we have, trucks of food sitting very close by, as we speak, that are not being allowed in, that are expiring. And we're seeing images of children starving. So I just really have no words, honestly. You'll have to excuse me, Jono, because there's just been a lot of talk and just no action. I just don't know what can be said at this
so
point.
understandable. Michael, it's not that the rhetoric changed, but the wording changed when it came from starvation to having the endorsement of it being a famine. Not the endorsement that you want, but that kind of changed the public outlook, it seems at least. And we've had more of a hardline stance from the West, having sympathy on Gaza and trying to get aid in there as quick as possible since those words were used.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that happened over the weekend. One, it was just recently the 40th anniversary of Live Aid. So Bob Geldof was out in front of the cameras speaking about, I might not be an expert on war, but I'm an expert on famine, and this is famine. These people are starving. The other thing is that there were reports that within the military, the Israeli military, they said that there's no evidence that Hamas was stealing any aid. And then I think the third thing, and this is to Lubna's point, is that we all know when a politician is not being completely transparent. In this particular case, there's no arguing with the images that you see. The Israeli government may say that Hamas is stealing, and you don't know because you're not on the ground. But you can't argue with the image of a starving Palestinian child. And I think that's where the global community seems to be shifting. Add into the fact that the French president, one of the G7 leaders, came out and said, in September, we're going to recognize Palestinian statehood. And I think those are moments that have come together to help the global community recognize that there needs to be a lot more pressure put on, not just the Americans, but also the Israelis.
Lubna, Saudi and France are pushing for this two-state solution as well, a two-state front. We have a pause of 10 hours now. Like we said, we're very hopeful that that will be extended. We're very hopeful we'll work towards some real diplomacy. Or do you think it's still a very distant dream?
I mean, do you really think that we can have a two-state solution at this point?
I mean, I think anything is on the table right now. What the concern is that any sort of a break in the fighting indicates that we're moving towards some sort of a progress.
Yeah.
And although no, I don't think many people can see that on the table right now.
I just don't see any progress, honestly. I see that they've gotten away with everything, and again, it's all theatrics to me. So it's very sad because I think a two-state solution was on the table. Before.
We're past that point, you think?
I think we're definitely past that point. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where we move forward, what we're going to see. Are they going to relocate the Palestinians? What's going to happen to Gaza? It's a business project at the end of the day, right? I always say business and politics are one. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it's going to go, but I definitely don't think a two-state solution is on the table. Absolutely not.
But I do think that, if the Israelis want to conduct business with the Saudis, which they do, the Saudis are the ones that are standing firm saying, if we're going to normalize relations with Israel, then we need a two-state solution. And now it's the Saudis and it's the French who are going to be at the UN General Assembly in September asking for a vote on Palestinian statehood. And it'll be interesting to see what goes on there and also to hear about what's going on behind the scenes, if there will be more G7 countries as well as other countries who will get on board with that. Then when there's a global shift in perception, I don't know how long Israel and the US will be able to hold out. At the very least, I think the Israelis will have to come to the negotiating table.
And just to clarify, that Saudi are facilitating that meeting and not part of the push on the two-state front. But Michael, thank you so much. And Lubna, I appreciate that. That is a difficult conversation to have. And thank you for your honesty and openness on that. Thank you both very much. Finally, it's time to move on to the last part of the show. And here, Michael and Lubna's stories of the day. Michael, let's turn to you first. A story about a new women's-only app that has got millions of users on board and many more trying to join day by day.
So it's called Tea Dating Advice. Now, I think I need to start by defining what tea means in 2025. It is spilling the tea, sharing gossip, sharing information. So this app allows only women, after they verify their identity, they are able to go on and then speak about, sometimes anonymously if they want, men who might be topics of conversation. So if a woman has dated Jono, then Jono can be talked about. What is happening, though, at least the criticism that's being leveled, is that there may be some women who just don't like you, even if they haven't dated you. And those women are in the same position as someone who has dated you, and they'll be able to maybe share information that might not be 100% honest.
Is this open source TripAdvisor style dating for women? Is that what this is?
It's almost like giving Jono Yelp reviews.
Wow.
And there isn't the verification for a woman who has to prove that, in fact, she dated you.
Lubna, however, I will point out, this app is doing things like spotting catfishes and making sure that there are men out there who may have secret wives that may already be in relationships. Is this 2025 dating? Is this how it should be in 2025?
Gosh, I sure hope not. Look, I'm all for the sisterhood, right? But this is really toxic, I think. I think it's not fair. It's giving me Andrew Tate female vibes. I don't think it's also fair play for the men, right? Because it should be, I believe it's only open for women, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's fair game if the men can't defend themselves on the app, right? Because you can go out with somebody and have a bad date, but he's not necessarily a bad guy. So I just think it creates a bigger divide between men and women. And
now, there is a male version that's in development, but obviously we're a bit slower to the table on this. But the guys are working on one, Michael, right?
Yeah, in fact, I think they have come out with it. It's called Cheeky, and it is in direct response to T-dating advice. Now, I will say that T-dating advice was developed by Sean Cook in the States in 2023, and he did it because he saw his mother who had been catfished. And he wanted to make sure, 100% valid reason, that women had an option to verify that the men that they were going to go out on a date with were actually who they said they were. Now, unfortunately, there are holes, it seems, in the app, and some of those holes are creating some rift and some issues with a lot of men.
Look, I think this is a great move for the dating apps would be for them to do the verification, right? So, you know, if I were the founder of Bumble, for example, I would go out and try and make updates to the app to tackle this issue, right? So I think it's about regulation when it comes to dating apps as well. It's just that at the end of the day, what is the value behind this app? It's just creating a wider rift between men and women, right? It's not actually going back to the original goal, which is to catch catfish, right?
Well, I mean, if we look at apps like Raya and other apps that are out there for high net worth individuals who are of a certain ilk and also in a certain industry, that is making sure that those individuals have been verified across references, their LinkedIn and their social media, make sure that all that information is correct. So maybe there is a market for people who are in the dating world who want to make sure they're getting the real deal without getting catfished. Is there a benefit there, do you think? Or would that be another specific app you would sign up to if you thought these are genuine, verified people?
Yeah, I mean, look, even if this app was dedicated to, you know, protecting women who are vulnerable on dating apps, that's fine. But it seems to be now a cesspool, you know, against men, right? And just, you know, talking badly about men. And unfortunately, it's just going down a downward spiral, right? So I just think it's, you know, it's not very good, really.
And I think we've been having, if the guys had come up with this app first, I think it's a different conversation we'd have been having about this, Michael, right?
Yeah, but men don't need that because they're not as vulnerable as women, right? So I do understand why.
We're a bit more dense, I'm not going to lie. So we're more likely to fall for the honey trap, I think.
Probably. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, you both answered it fine.
We will move on. Lubna, your story. A big PR move from a company that's been making headlines. Astronomer, we've heard lots about them. Their CEO was at the Coldplay gig, and we know that his HR executive was also on board. They've now got a Hollywood star. Gwyneth Paltrow has been involved in this.
Marketing genius, honestly. So they hired Chris Martin's ex-wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, to be their temporary spokeswoman. And I think it's a brilliant PR move. But I think the even better move would have been to hire Astronomer CEO's ex-wife herself.
She certainly would have had a lot to say, I think.
Yeah.
They've kind of gone underground, both, right? We've heard nothing from any of the trio who were involved in this, right?
No, I think you're right. I haven't heard anything. And I wonder if maybe one of the first, like, we don't know what was going on behind the scenes. We don't know if, what arrangements these guys had. We don't know if the marriages were already in trouble. And also, you might have had family members reaching out to people saying, you know what your best move is? Reach out to a lawyer and stay under the radar. Let things clear. Figure out what it is that you want to do. They could end up together staying married, or something else could develop. But the smart move, when you don't know what you're going to do, is probably just not to say anything.
Lubna, this company that are behind it.
Maximum Effort, Ryan Reynolds' advertising company.
Genius.
Absolutely genius. I love his ads as well, honestly. So yeah, I mean, brilliant, just brilliant. But do you think it's a little bit insensitive to the wife? I mean, everyone's making kind of a joke out of it. It's gone completely viral.
I mean, again, I would like to think that it's all in jest. I don't see anything. They've had a conscious uncoupling. I think what they've done, as in Gwyneth Paltrow, they're just capitalising on the now moment. And this company's not publicly listed, but if it was, I would be buying some stock in that in the last 2 weeks, because I can see them going through the roof. They're having their now moment, and it's not going to last very long.
And I think the amazing thing also is that we've seen companies like Noon also, I forgot what the ad said right now, but they were basically making fun of the kiss cam as well. So it's reached all the way in Dubai.
Yeah,
so.
And even Oasis, I think, at their recent concert said, don't worry, we don't have a kiss cam here. So everyone's getting on board. Well, thank you so much to both of our guests for today. Michael Jabri-Pickett, the Managing Director of This Is Dubai, and journalist Lubna Hamdan. Thank you both very much. That is all from us on W News Extra for today. But don't forget, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. GNT with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Goodbye.